On this week's episode, I'm joined by Cira Camacho. And in typical Portuguese fashion, Cira is many things. A mom, an archaeologist, a professional guide at Ebora Megalithica, singer, a bookworm, and proud Alentejana. We discuss, amongst other things, the amazing history that surrounds us, not only in her region, but everywhere in Portugal. The incredible Cromlech of Almendres stones, otherwise known as Portugal's Stonehenge, and what it means to live vagado. Welcome back, or welcome to another episode of Portugal the Simple Life. It's season 2, episode 2, and I'm absolutely delighted to be joined here by Cira Camacho. Cira, hello, welcome.
Hi there, Dylan. Thank you for having me. Nice meeting you, and let's do this.
Yeah, finally, we've been talking about this for months now, actually.
Yeah.
But I was just really lazy and underachieving, and
Sure.
we're finally here doing this, so I'm happy. Cira, maybe you can. Cira is not a common Portuguese name.
No, it's not.
Only with wine, but spelled differently, Cira.
Exactly.
But maybe you can tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I'm Cira. I am an archaeologist. I live in Alentejo, Montemor Novo, to be specific. I have a 7-year-old boy. I'm 36 years old. And, I'm also a singer. I'm very involved with a lot of things. That's me. That's part of living in this city, is being able to be many different things at the same time. So it kind of comes with it. We're never just one thing in Montemor.
We're going to get into Montemor. You have a very calm nature that's very Alentejana. That's a very Alentejo thing. For people listening, Alentejo is a region in Portugal. It's the biggest region of Portugal in terms of geographically.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's the least densely populated as well, correct?
Yeah.
And there's always the jokes about that everything in the Alentejo happens slower.
We have vagar, okay? Vagar means we have time, and we'll get there. And when we do things, we're just very calm. It doesn't mean that we're not stressed about things. We just tend to look at things as, I'll do it. Okay, we've been through worse. We'll do it. Well, whatever. If life gives you lemons, we don't just make lemonade. We do lemon curd and lemon pastries and lemon lemon cake. We'll get there. We got time, and that's the thing about Alentejo. Everything is so spaced out that you need time. You need time to just focus, concentrate, and get things done.
The one of the jokes when I moved to Portugal, one of the jokes I heard early on about Alentejo was that the water moves slower in the Alentejo than it does anywhere else. Can you confirm if that's true or not?
There's not a lot of water in Alentejo, so I don't know.
That's true. Have you had some rain recently, at least?
We've had rain. It's a little bit later in time. But normal, yeah. And I don't know if it's going to work in terms of actually permeating the landscape. But we're fortunate to have oaks all over, and they kind of help our at least holding some water on the surface. We got other problems with super intensive agriculture. Let's not go there. But I hope the rain is going to help. It's not very pleasant because we're used to the sun, and we're always grumpy when it's raining and it's cold. And it's supposed to be not supposed to be raining, but we need it. We just have it, and then we're blessed.
Yeah, we need some more rain. So we need the people in the Alentejo to do some rain dances out there, on the fields or something.
Yeah, we need some shaman here doing some asking for the rains.
Exactly. Cira, tell us a little bit about your village. I've been there a couple of times, Montemor Novo. It's got an amazing castle, a very good restaurant as well that I've been to.
Patio dos Petiscos.
Patio dos Petiscos. Yeah, we've been there 3 or 4 times. When we passed through, we kind of just happened to stop there. And it's amazing. But tell us a little bit about your village. What do you love about it? What it's famous for? What do you want people to know about it? The floor is yours.
Montemor is amazing. I wasn't even born here, but it's just this is my house. It feels like home. And the thing about Montemor is that you don't need to be from Montemor. You don't need to be born in Montemor. You just need to be here. If you are here, if you devote yourself to the community, then you are Montemorense. You are from Montemor. In Montemor, what I love most about it is that, of course, it's the castle and all the history and all the archaeology around, but mostly this sense of community that we've got that comes with it being a small town, but it's a small town full of very, very intelligent people. And it's a small town full of kind, generous people and people wanting to make a difference. So that's what I love the most about Montemor, the fact that if you like sports, you got it. If you like music, you've got it. If you like whatever, you've got it. And it's really nice. And the quality of life is incredible because it comes with being a small town in a rural area, but you've got everything that you need in a town. But you also, 2 steps out of the city line, you're on the countryside, so you can eat locally. You can be responsible when you consume, when you eat, when you drink, when you can just, and then neighbors will knock on your door and ask if you want lemons or if you need eggs. So this is, Montemor is just, it's a great place to live. Of course, we complain about many things. We always complain. It's the thing about Portuguese people. If we don't complain, we don't make things better. But it's a really good place to live, and a lot of things could change, but a lot of things are good as they are. So that kind of helps us love the place. And then we're surrounded by so many interesting things. In my case, I love the history and the archaeology and all of the culture around Montemor. But if you have different interests, nature, landscape, whatever, just Montemor has it. Not beach though. We don't have beach.
No. How close is the nearest beach?
It's 100 something kilometers away. Okay. So it's just like we're halfway from Spain and the coast, the west coast.
Okay, so you're right in the middle of the country width-wise.
Exactly.
Oh, that's cool. That's good. How did you get into this line of work? Are you in Montemor because you're an archaeologist, or are you an archaeologist because you're in Montemor? How did that all happen?
Okay, I might be an archaeologist because I'm in Montemor.
Okay.
I'm in Montemor because my mother's family is from here. Okay. So I was born in Lisbon. We lived in Algueirão, close to Sintra, for a few years, and then she came back home.
Also very historic. Home. Also very historic area.
Yeah, that area is amazing also, but I feel at home here. And although I was always back and forth between Sintra and Montemor, because my grandparents, my father's side, they still live there, my cousins. So I'm very connected to that area, but this is where I feel at home. However, since I was very small, I wanted to be a writer, which is crazy. My brain this week I can write. And at some point, my mother worked in an excavation as a volunteer at the castle. And then I decided I wanted to write about archaeology. But then and that was probably 92, something like that. And then when I turned 10, I decided, no, archaeology might be better for me. And that's it. I'm very stubborn. I hate school. I've hated school my whole life. But I'm very stubborn. So that's why I'm an archaeologist. I did it. I made it.
So you hated school, but you ended up being like this history nerd and love to read and archaeologist and everything. Exactly. Amazing.
Yeah. Amazing. It's a school. It's probably the only institution in the world that has not evolved a lot in the last 100 years. So because now if we're just more aware of the several kinds of intelligence, right? Not everybody has the same intelligence. Yeah. So you can't really be judging people on the same standards. You need to be more flexible. So I think that's why I hated school. It wasn't just sitting there, and it's just not for me. And I don't know why, but I always hated it. My grandfather let me skip school.
Yeah.
He did.
We had a previous guest on the podcast in season 1, a guy called Pedro Prata, and he works for he runs an organization called Rewilding Portugal. Okay. Out in the Viseu area, Guarda, and and he spoke about the same thing, that at school he was kind of like into it, but not really. But his grandfather was a shepherd, and that's where he learned the most about nature and about animals and just being out. And that's what really inspired him to go in the direction he did. Yeah. What was it around you? I mean, for you, maybe it's a really obvious answer, but for people listening, maybe not so much. What was it around you that inspired you so much to get into this line of work and go in this direction?
Well, of course, Portugal all around is a very historical country, and the amount of heritage and human occupation, the layers of history is just amazing. And we live, and the thing is that not that the other countries are not old, but most of their communities do not leave a lot of archaeological record. And in here, you find them. And it's not all perishable materials. We build with huge stones. We leave a record on the landscape. And then it's a very small country, so it's very condensed. But if you think about it as an Iberian Peninsula, then you kind of get the point. It's just so heavily populated for such a long time. And when you're surrounded by all that, I live in a house that's at least as old as the 16th century. So, and it's still standing. And this for us is like yesterday. It's like yesterday. And when you have that kind of context, like you do have in Portugal, all over, wherever you go in Portugal, you kind of get it. So for me, it was obvious that I love heritage, I love culture, I love humans. And humans produce culture. And heritage is the result of that culture. So for me, it was very obvious living in a place like this, as old as Portugal, even as a country, is a pretty old country. So it's not just the context of Europe or the peninsula, it's the context of Portugal, of being a nation. For me, it was obvious. And I think for everybody that comes to Portugal has this idea, such a small country, let's take a week and stay one night here, there, and there. And then they get here and they are overwhelmed because there's so much to do. And then they're like, I don't have time. So you need time in Portugal. It's very small, like this little rectangle, but there's so much to do. And I actually used to work in a hotel. And I know that firsthand. People got there, I have one night, what can I do? And I'm like, one night? Okay. So you got wineries they can visit. You have several restaurants in town that you can go to. You have megaliths, you have Roman stuff, you have this, you have that, you have that, you have that. You have the landscape, you got the cork. And they're like, okay, not enough.
Like you said, vagar, you need time.
Vagar, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I was in Lisbon yesterday, and I was, Lisbon, you can never park anywhere. So I parked in this underground thing, and walking up the stairs of the stairwell, they had little cabinets in the stairwell with stones and ceramic display from like the Roman times that they discovered when they excavated the car park. You just like, it's just everywhere. There's just history. I remember doing a walk many, many years ago, a hike it was an organized hike, and we were walking up this hill. It was in the middle of nowhere, and the stones, the guys were like, the Romans laid these stones. And you're just like, wow, everywhere you look in the most random places, there's this history. Because I grew up loving castles as a boy, but I grew up in South Africa. Everything's pretty much destroyed. So you would occasionally bump into an old wall somewhere or a ruin, but then you come to Portugal and, there's more than 300 and something castles. Every town's got one. It's just amazing. It's just like a playground for someone that likes history. Yeah. So it's an amazing, amazing place. To introduce how we got in touch, I watched a documentary on BBC about, I'm going to try to pronounce it correctly, Almendres, Cromlech, which is, they talked about it as the Stonehenge of Portugal. I mean, this is way cooler than Stonehenge, way cooler. So that's how we got in touch. I saw this documentary and I was like, okay, I need to find this. I need to find Sita and get her on the podcast to talk about that. Tell us a little bit about what these are for people that don't know the Almendres Cromlech.
Yeah. So Portugal is not just history. Portugal is also prehistory. And these monuments are called megaliths because they are built with big stones. Megalith is what it means. So this is one art form that humans have produced all over. This is a global phenomena. But let's talk about the ones in Alentejo. It's the ones I'm more familiar with.
So it wasn't aliens. It wasn't aliens. It was humans, right?
Yeah.
I had to ask the question.
You had to ask that one.
Yeah. Okay.
If it were aliens, my hair would be like this. No. So yeah, people have been producing these monuments with big stones for a long time. And actually, until the 20th century, there are still people in the world building with big stones and building megaliths in the same way we assume that they built 7,000 years ago, which is the case of Cromlech, but they've been dated older than that. But Cromlech's one example of one of those art forms. So that art form, megalithism, evolves through time. The first representations of that art is just a solo standing stone. The menhirs scattered throughout the landscape. We see them as the first representations of that art, the first Alentejanos, the first people, the first farmers, the first shepherds to settle in Alentejo, built those. Then they evolve gradually to cromlechs. So cromlechs are, instead of one solo standing stone, they're standing together. So there's several menhirs in one cromlech or a megalithic enclosure. Which is
so a megalith would be one big stone planted into the ground.
Exactly.
Cromlech is a collection.
Exactly, that's it.
So normally they're standing together, or normally in a type of a pattern. What is the similarities there? Is there any patterns?
Yeah, so cromlechs, it kind of depends because cromlechs also evolve. They go from being horseshoe shaped to being oval to being circular. But the oldest ones all follow a rule, and we've got enough to compare. And these rules are, is just choose a hill, a particular hill for some reason that we lost. But they're not on top of the hill. They're always on the slope that's facing the east. And they're always aligned in a horseshoe shape. So these are the rules.
Facing sunrise.
The east. Yeah. Sunrise, moonrise, anything rise. And everything rises in the east. So the rules of the old cromlechs are always these. And they have specific orientations, astronomical orientations. So basically, history is all about several disciplines coming together to produce knowledge. But archaeology, and especially prehistory archaeology, we need to surround ourselves with several people that have different looks on world and several disciplines behind them, because I might need a geologist to identify the stones or where they come from. And I need an archaeoastronomer to tell me how those things align with the stars and the sun and the moon. And then I need anthropologists to, tell me how people think and what might be the thought process behind it. So there's a lot of people that have to come together in order to produce more knowledge. But the thing about prehistory is part of its charm, and it's also a little bit frustrating, is that there's no writers, there's no writing, there's no author to tell you if you're right or if you're wrong. So you might be here theorizing and making educated guessing. There's a lot of investigation, but whatever sits on an imaginary level, we'll never know. So that's why I say it's part of the charm, but also it's a little bit frustrating because we humans like to know everything. But prehistory keeps you on your toes. It kind of tells you, if it doesn't leave an archaeological record, you might not ever be able to understand it.
Yeah.
Those,
what is the average size of those stones? Because they look pretty huge.
It kind of depends. They can vary from a very small 1 meter tall to a very big 7 meters tall. But it just varies. And the thing about the oldest buildings, the oldest megalithic constructions, they are built with stones that are found like that in nature. So basically, they're already worked by the glacier movements. And they're hunting for menhirs instead of quarrying them because there's no metal and they only use stone tools. So the first ones start as just stones that are found like that in nature, but then much later in time, the last representations of megalithic art, especially the dolmens, they are produced approximately 5,000 years ago. We expect them to be quarrying by that time. We don't know how, but we know that there's still people today using the natural crevices on the stones to crack it. And they use wooden stakes, and then they use water to make the wood expand. And then they crack the stone. They direct the fracture of the stone. So we imagine there will be something like that. But they produce megastones for so long that the technologies evolved during that time. So I've read the other day that some of our menus can be dated approximately 9,000 years old.
Wow.
The menus, just the solo ones. So imagine, even if we started 9,000 years ago, we produced them until 4,000 years ago. It's a long time to be producing art with big stones. Then it just stops Copper Age. But it's a long time. So it's obviously the technologies evolve.
Yeah. The ones in where you are there at the Cromlech of Almendres, Cromlech, they're kind of round shaped. So that was going to be one of my questions when you compare, if we're going to compare to Stonehenge, those are square and kind of stacked on top of each other.
Yeah.
They were naturally formed that way, these round ones, and they were brought in.
Yes.
Incredible.
And Stonehenge, this one predates Stonehenge by 2,000 years.
Wow.
So that's why they're very different representations. It's the same art, it's megalithism, but they're very different representations, when we also think that they have a very different function just because they're produced with 2,000 years in between. And there's people who could decode how Stonehenge works as a calendar. You can actually count the days. And at the Cromlech of Almendres, that's not the case. What you see there, the orientations that it produces, it doesn't reflect on it being a calendar or people needing that particular stone to tell them when to plant or when to harvest. They don't need it. They know the phenomena for a long time. Yeah. So it's something more.
Interesting. That was going to be my question, because there's all these theories that it's scientific, that it's religious, that it's
all that.
You've referred to it as art as well.
I like to.
So maybe they're like, hey, that hilltop looks kind of boring, let's decorate it. But I mean, what's your theory? Is it a combination of all of those things?
Yeah, because it's a theory that we in my company, there's two archaeologists who are always discussing, and also with friends that are specialists in megalithism, we're always discussing what it might be. In my opinion, it can be called art because humans have been known to produce art, but it can also be a religious process because a lot of humans produce art, but they're motivated by this or that or that or that. Yeah. So I think that we actually think that that place acted as a gathering place. A huge gathering place for all of these communities that are settling and settled in this area for such a long time together. And then it would act approximately as a medieval plaza, where everything happens, from the religious manifestations, the procissões, or the markets, or the gossiping, or just the chit chat of the day. And so we think that act as a place for not only celebrations, it has definitely a ritualization behind it, because you wouldn't need that many stones. You wouldn't need to orient them in a certain way to have a place to gather. So you have something behind it. But you also have something practical, right?
Yeah, but also because on a practical level, that was a hell of a job to get those stones there.
Oh, definitely. And it took them a long time to get to that point.
Yeah, and where would they have brought them in from? Would they have found them in this location, or would they have brought them from afar?
They're brought from all over, but they didn't have to go that far, because granite, which is a kind of stone that we find in the Cromlech, is very common in this area of Alentejo. But we expect him to, and actually, I think there's, of course, a geologist looks at the stone and can tell you where it comes from, but there's no real outcrops that can produce that kind of stone within a 2-kilometer radius of the Cromlech. And I've read somewhere, it's a problem about me reading stuff, I can't remember where, it just sticks to me, but I can't remember from where, but I think some of them came from approximately 5 kilometers away. Wow. So it's not that far. It's not that far. We had a lot of granite.
How much does each one weigh?
Several tons.
Yeah, so that's far for any.
That's far.
5 kilometers for a couple of tons. That's far.
That's very far. But you need to keep in mind, whenever you look at these phenomena, you can only have constructions with big stones if you've got a lot of people. And although it's very easy to think of a way to carry them, and although the concepts, we still use the same concepts because the laws of physics don't really change. We need to deal with them however we can. all we need is a lot of people. And if we have such a high concentration of megaliths in this area, it only means one thing. There's a lot of people living in the area. And if there's a lot of people living in the area, then the landscape provides for the quality of life that people expect in one place. And if people keep inhabiting a place for so much time, then it means it's consistently good for humans to settle or to live around, because we're talking about things that were produced when we humans change into shepherds and farmers. We start being who we are. This is what we call the Neolithic period, the New Stone Age period. But before that, we also have archaeological record of hunter-gatherers in the area. And this archaeological record goes back as much as 50,000 years ago. So if 50,000 years ago, this is a good place to live, then, and today it's still a good place to live, what does that tell you about the place? It's special. It's Portugal. And it's Alentejo.
Yeah. Well, we already know the dinosaurs liked it here as well. So we've got that. We had Octavio Mateus he was on the podcast, and he said the dinosaurs already knew how to live well. That's why they were here. But just to come back to your thing there and it's going to lead into another question about the history of Portugal. The fact that so many people were involved in getting these stones into one place, no one's going to put that much work into it and then not use the place.
And if it's not important.
Yes, it must have been important. They must have used it for a purpose. It must have been something really important to a large group of people because of just the sheer amount of work that it took to get those things there. But this now opens up another thing, and it's a lot of what people don't know, and we know it because we live here. But the amount of different types of people from all over the place that were in Portugal at any one given moment is pretty phenomenal for such a small little country. And now we're talking about a place that's 100 kilometers inland, and there was this mass gathering of people. That's amazing. It is
actually, and that's Portugal. It's this layers and layers and layers and layers of several cultures, of 7 invasions, as many people like to call it. And they are, in a sort, but from prehistory until today, we're just a mix of several cultures that keep getting here and coming and coming and coming, and mixing with who's here. So Portugal today is a result of that many thousands of years of human evolution and culture on top of culture, on top of culture, on top of culture. And then that's what you see when you dig. And sometimes you don't even have to dig. It's actually kind of confusing for people that think that we dig. We use a stratigraphical method, of course. So the deeper you dig, the older it gets. But in places like Évora, for example, or Montemor, that happens too. Sometimes you don't have to dig to find old things. Sometimes just take the plaster off your wall and it looks like a 19th century wall, and then there's a 16th century portal in it. So, or sometimes you go to the municipality hall, which is a 19th century beautiful building with the architecture of iron and glass that you'd expect in Paris or, Eiffel-like structure. And then you find a round room. You never ask why the room is round. When you take the plaster off the wall, you keep looking at the walls and you think there's something weird about this. This is not modern construction. This is not medieval. This is Roman. And then you find out why the room is round, because before they put a palace on top that subsequently transformed into the town hall, the Roman baths were there. And that particular round room is on top of pre-existing round room of the 1st century, where Romans actually had a huge hot tub. And so this is Évora. Sometimes you don't, or Alentejo or Portugal. It's all a mix, and it's all rich. And wherever you go, you can be surprised.
Yeah, I want to come back to that. Oh, there's so much, Sita. Where do we go? And we don't have hours. But anyway,
I'm all over the place all the time.
No, you're not. It's amazing. It's so fascinating. I just want to come quickly back to one of the Cromlechs. I remember in the documentary that you did with the BBC, you mentioned, you showed one that had like these little dimples in it.
Oh, yeah.
And you had a theory about the dimples. So just tell us about that quickly.
I love dimples.
I want people to look you up, and I want people to come and go and see the Cromlechs with you, and go see that whole area. They have to get in touch with you, and we'll talk about that at the end. But tell me about that. What was the deal with that, with the rock with the dimples?
Actually, the reason it's my favorite menhir on the whole Cromlech is because it's got the dimples that Portuguese people call covinhas,
Exactly.
The word for it's cup mark, not dimples. I just call it dimples because I think it's very...
Dimples is a better word.
It's a better word, isn't it? The reason why I like it is because the cup mark phenomena, or the dimples, they're found all over. They're a global phenomenon. And we have no idea what they are. And the thing about being on that documentary on BBC Real is that our email and our social media got flooded with people sharing their dimples, sharing their representations. And that was amazing for me because, I already know there's some Polynesian peoples that use structures like that to place the umbilical cords of babies. It's got to do with their mythology close to the volcano. I already know of other cup marks in other places. They're associated with the ring marks, the spirals you'd associate with Ireland, for example. Yeah. So we already know there's a lot of dimples. And in Portugal, in Alentejo, we find them everywhere, on menhirs, on bedrock, on a stone that's just laying around, from 1 to 70 to more. There's a lot of representations of that. You don't know what that means. But there was one particular interesting email that I got. I can't even remember the email, but a person from California sent me a photo of their cup marks, of their dimples. And there's one particular sentence that person said that just blew my mind, which is, we can only find these all over California when we have a coexistence of granite and oaks. And in Alentejo, we're surrounded by granite and oaks. Plus, he sent me a photo of a Native American woman using those dimples for something.
Wow.
She was processing acorns.
Wow.
The fruit of the oak.
So she put it inside.
She put it inside the shallow ones that are very similar to ours. She used to peel the acorn, so to take the shell. Amazing. And then they have deeper ones that we don't have a lot, really deep ones, where they would grind the acorn and soak it in water. Because American oaks, you cannot eat the acorn without processing it. There's too much tannin. You need to grind it up, you need to soak it, and then what you eat is not very pleasant. It's just paste. And in Portugal, and especially in Alentejo, you've got the holm oak, a zinheira, and you can eat those acorns. You pick them up and you eat them. And they're sweet as chestnuts. Maybe that's why the dimples weren't as deep, because we didn't need to process them. You got it. So It's interesting, but I still choose to call it art, especially at the Cromlech, because it's not, and because we find them everywhere and in several orientations, or so we can find it on a horizontal place, and that could be used to peel acorns. But if you find it on a menhir, like you do at the Cromlech, it's got a diagonal alignment, and sometimes you find them vertically aligned on the surface of stones. It's not gonna be possible to do any processing or any peeling in there, or hold anything in. Yeah. So the best part about those dimples, and the dimples that we find in Alentejo, is that you have no idea what they are. Some of them might be art, some of them might be for processing acorns, some of them might be just people bored creating those, some might be later peoples after the Neolithic leaving their mark on structures that they find all over the landscape. They don't know what they mean, but they're reinterpreting them. So the thing about the dimples is I like to know things, of course, but it's good. It kind of keeps you on your toes and helps you understand that you don't need to know everything. And most of the times you will not find out what's up with things. And that's also good. It leaves something for the imagination. But it's found all over. And it's just, I think it was just produced within a massive amount of time. Time frame is very large and by different people. So they achieve the same result, but with different ideas behind it. That's what's cool about it, at least for me.
Amazing. Okay, I want to play a bit of a game, okay, because the problem with covering that area for history is, where, again, like you said, where do you start? There's so much.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you, we're going to do 3 other sort of interesting sites that people should visit in the general area. I'm going to ask you about 2 that I've chosen myself, and I'm going to ask you just what you can tell us about these 2 places. And a brief overview, and then you're going to choose one for the 3rd that we want to send people to. Okay, are you ready?
I am.
So the first one is your castle, Montmornovo. Why is it there? Tell people about it. It's a super cool castle. It's got an amazing garden. It's kind of rugged. It's not as well kept as some of the others, but that's what makes it really cool. But tell us about the castle and why it's there.
Castle in Montemor is there because Montemor, that village, used to be inside the walls. Okay, so all over Portugal, you're going to find castles that are not only fortresses. The villages used to be inside those walls. So also Montemor, though, if we break down the word, you get the largest hill, and then o novo, the new, because there's an old one close to Coimbra. So it's the largest hill in the area. It's not because not the highest, but largest. So it can't accommodate a really, really big village inside it. And because, well, it's got the river on the south, so it creates a natural fortification, if you want to call it, or line of defense. And then to the north is pretty high, so you have a good overview of the landscape. So in times of trouble, it might have been used as a fortress, but the most important time for Montemor was after the Christian reconquest, and it's actually the one that we know most about, because whatever was there before, we don't find a lot of archaeological record to know the whole story. But when the Christians took Évora, Montemor came with the package. But from then on, the village was developed on top of the hill, inside walls. This is just how it's our modus operandi. We build walls, even if we don't need them. We put walls around our villages. And it was there for a long time. And when the king was living in Évora for long periods, the court was there. It was a very important region. Montemor was also very important because I mentioned already, it's on the roads, like right in the middle between Lisbon and Spain, and Lisbon and Évora, 30 kilometers away from Évora. So the king actually stayed in Montemor for many times, and we held court in Montemor. And actually, Montemor is one particular place, and the castle of Montemor, or the walled area, because the castle is just a fortress. We have one too, but the walled area that we today call castle, it was the village. It was the historical center of Montemor. It's where two very important decisions to the history of Portugal and the world were taken. And the first one is when the king and the court, it was decided that Portugal is going to have a university. Estudos Gerais, the first university of Portugal that was all between Lisbon and Coimbra, until it's settled in Coimbra.
But it was decided there that there would be a university. Wow.
That some money from the church would go towards the creation of the Portuguese university.
Wow.
That's awesome. One. And now the other one is, it was decided in Montemor that someone would go and look for the maritime way to get to India.
Wow.
The first global empire started in Montemor.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay.
Plus, my favorite part about Montemor Castle, the excavation site, because we found the houses of the people who used to live there. For me, that's more important than big things. The way they live, the way they deal with problems that they have on top of the hill that eventually led the whole city to move to the valley. The lack of water. There's no natural source of water on the hill. So we found everything from cisterns and piping and ways of gathering water from the rain. We found a of course, we found, what do you call them? A place to make wine. I just, the name slipped my mind. Exactly, one adega. Yeah. We found one adega. We found one synagogue. Amazing. We found, it's amazing. And it's just a really cool place to visit. And you said it's not very well taken care of. Well, very recently, they actually created better structure. So visitors can actually, the fruition is much better.
I'll have to come back.
And you can also see the excavations because you have one particular structure that goes on top of it. You can walk and look at things, and interpretation is also provided now. So you need to come back and see what we've done.
Deal. We know we're going to eat lunch, so that's good. Okay, let's go 30 kilometers to the neighbors, Évora.
Évora.
And it's difficult again because Évora is this like massive, like historical structure with so many things. But let's talk about the Chapel of the Skulls.
Chapel of the Bones, yeah.
Yeah, the Chapel of the Bones. For people that don't know what that is, it's a whole chapel and the inside is just filled with bones, human bones. It's cool. It's got a really amazing quote above the door.
Nós ossos que aqui estamos, pelos vossos esperamos.
Those of us here are waiting for you, basically. Yeah. It's creepy, but it's awesome. Tell us about that place.
Well, it's actually a very interesting place, and people often say, "Oh, it's creepy. It's got bones," but actually, it's more than that. It's the actual. It's the way people communicate, and it comes in a context after the Reform, the Protestant Reform. So we never get that. We were always Catholic in general. So the Counter-Reform was very aggressive in the way they communicate. So after the Protestant Reform, what happened all over Portugal is that you've got, for example, fresco paintings, they get covered up. So they put lace on necklines and ankles. They cover up the saints that were produced before. So they're very aggressive and trying to make it more, I don't even know what, it's almost prudish, but it's something like that. It's a current, it's very aggressive in the way they communicate. And the bones shovel comes in that aggressive way of communicating. It's not about death. It's not about death. It's about the brevity of life and how little time you've got to do things right.
It's very stoic.
Exactly. Yeah. So, nós ossos que aqui estamos, foi pelos vossos esperamos, it means that we are here, we've been where you are, you're gonna eventually get here, and time is of the essence. You need to do things right.
It's not very Alentejana. It's not very Alentejana. You know, Alentejo is vaga.
No, it's not very
Alentejana. It's interesting. I never thought of it. I should have thought about it from. Yeah, I should have thought about it from that perspective. It's amazing.
Yeah,
it's incredible.
Exactly.
Okay, yours. Where else would you send people? Another interesting spot in the area. I know it's a difficult question for you.
It's really hard, but I'm going to go with Cromlech of Almendres. We've talked about it. It's an amazing site. It's one of the largest, one of the oldest cromlechs. It's got approximately, I think it's 94 stones still standing today there. That used to be more than 100. I'll keep that in mind. And it's just an amazing place. The landscape that surrounds us, it's the original landscape, the Montado ecosystem. So if you like nature, it's your place. Yeah. If you like culture, it's your place. If you like to just be there and absorb the energy of the place, it's your place. It's for every taste. You've got something, you can find something there. Life just feels different at Cromlech of Almendres. And if you take a tour, you take a tour. If you don't, you don't take a tour. But it's an amazing place. And if it stands for something, what I'd like to highlight about it, even if you don't get a tour, at least keep this in mind. These monuments stand for something. And that's that particular time in prehistory when human beings changed completely. The way they live, the way they think, and they started being exactly who we are today. The people who produced those megaliths, they're not different from what we are. So that's one thing that you should always keep in mind when you go there. And plus, it's such a good place to live for such a long time that there were enough people in the area to create that kind of monument.
Amazing. Okay, you mentioned something at the beginning of the episode, and I'm going to tie this into a question to start wrapping up. And it's something that I love about our country. You mentioned how in Montmort, you just have to commit to being here, and then you're one of us. And that's something that I've seen in Portugal. Like if you buy in and you're like, okay, I'm all in and I'm just here and I'm going to give it everything, then you become one of the place. You become one of us, and you're welcomed and embraced, and you become part of the family and part of the community. And I love that about Portugal. And we see that in our history. We see that in a place like where you are right now, where, with the Almendres, Cromlech and these other places where people just came and were able to coexist in an amazing, beautiful, harmonic way. What in the history of Portugal, from what you've studied, from what you've researched, what in the history makes you proud of our country?
Well, actually, although I love history, and this is also part of our history, is how resilient we are. Portuguese resilience. It's just, and people might think that we're always sad because of fado, always complaining, always grumpy, but then we can, just crack laugh at anything, and dark sense of humor. But it's about being resilient. And whenever you say, "Hi, neighbor, how are you?" "Oh, I'm going." "I'm here."
To done that.
It's been worse, something like that. But it's how resilient we are. And although it might look like we're very tragic, we just know that we've been worse. So from now on, we just keep on going. And in history, you see that. You also see those in very recent history with the dictatorship and the resistance. And so we look like we're very calm and welcoming, and we are. But when we need to get things done, we get things done, and we just press on. Whatever you just throw our way, we will press on.
I like it. So, Sarah, how can people find you online, get in touch with you, and organize a tour to go to Cromlech, Almendres? What Almendres, Cromlech? Tell us how we can tell people how they can get in touch.
Well, my company is Ébora Megalítica, so you can find us everywhere on social media. We also have a website, www.eboramegalítica.com. And to book a tour, we have a form online, or you can send us an email, or you can just try to reach us on whatever platform that you can, and then we can tell you what's the better way of doing it. But basically, we're doing tours in Ébora Megalítica, not just of the Cromlech or the megalithic monuments, but we're also doing tours in the Évora Historical Center. I do both. We have a van, we can drive you to places. And we also have another thing, which is part of our experimental archaeology and educational program. So if you've got a family, a group of people, and you want to try out some primitive technologies like making fire, throwing prehistoric weapons, just making cyst plaques, which are our slate plaques, that are an artifact that we can only find in the southwestern part of the peninsula. So if you're into that, if you think your kids are going to profit from being outside and learn about prehistory in a very, very cool and fun way, just send us an email or get in touch with us. We have workshops, we do tailor-made programs, so just find us. And plus we are located very close to the Cromlech of Almendres, very close to a small river, Ribeira, and it's all very, very good.
Awesome. Okay, we're going to put links in the show notes so that people can get in touch. Sira, a question that we ask all of our guests: Portugal, the simple life. Why?
Well, it's not simple about good food, good wine, good people, good weather, good everything. It's just in Portugal, it's simple. It's simple. If you go to a restaurant, it's good. Go to a winery, it's good. If you go to the outside, you see monuments, you see nature. It's all simple, easy to find. It's all around us. And plus, we're like a country full of grandmas, always telling you to eat more. You're too skinny. And it's true. But the food is good, though.
Oh, yeah.
You can eat.
And we haven't even spoken about Alentejo wine, best in the country, hands down.
hands down. Yeah. Definitely the best in the country.
My wife and I, in terms of wine, we're team Alentejo, so there's no problem there.
Something about that crisp, dry wine that just and it shows the region. And you can also, when you taste the wine, you feel the region, all of the microclimates, all of the sunny landscape,
the depth to the flavor.
Exactly.
It tastes like the earth.
Exactly.
Wonderful. I've loved this conversation. It could have gone on for a lot longer. Thank you so much. And thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
It was a pleasure as well. I'm going to let you call it.
Well, I'm going to call it a megalithic wrap.
So thank you once again to Sila, and thank you to all of you for listening. Please subscribe, share with your friends, give us a thumbs up, and please leave a comment or a review. We'd love to hear from you. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode. And as we say in Portugal, até próxima. Welcome to the simple life.